Okay, this is a bit of a boring subject, but I tell you, it gets pretty frigging exciting when you realise that you can't pay your bills. How old are you going to be before you start to experience life like you want it? I want to tell you right now, whether you like it or not, there is a better way to do business. Hi everyone, welcome to the Business for Builders podcast. My name's Max, I'm your host. I'm the Pres and CEO here in Canada for Smith & Sons, and I am the ambitious founder of EliteBusinessAdvisory.com, where I do customised coaching for general contractors. Great to have you in the room. Shout out to you if you're in podcast land or if you are in YouTube land. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you if you've been around with me for a little bit. And, of course, if it's the first time you've dropped in, I trust you get some value. Like and subscribe, all that sort of good stuff. Get across to Business for Builders VIP. And there's a private Facebook group there. Hit the answer the questions for me. And if you're a good sort, I'll let you in. Right. Enough housekeeping. Let's get after it. This month, we've been talking a little bit about cash flow and profit. I'm going to keep doing that for the next today and next week. But, I think it's important. There's a couple of things I want to draw out. And look, the more I do this, it's interesting because I do look around at what other podcasts are happening and what they do. And, a lot of podcasts rely on guests, and I'm not against that. Next month, we might even have a couple of special guests. But, really, today I guess I felt really like this needs to be a training session, or this needs to be something. And I guess for the most part, people would already say that that's kind of what I'm getting out of this show. And geez, I would love some feedback. If you're feeling, that way, shoot me an email, max@elitebusinessadvisory.com. And if you've got something you want me to chat about, shoot that email through as well. And I'll be happy to, check that out and see if I can speak to that. So, really, I think, as much as we want to be entertaining, I think you guys and gals are realistic to understand that sometimes you've just got to really focus on understanding some of the laborious and boring parts of our business, and then obviously finding someone who actually has a love of that. And, that is the magic of business. We don't have to be everything for every aspect of the business, although, like I've said, as it relates to when you're on site and you're doing, construction, you've got to have a black belt understanding of what's happening on the building site and with everybody that is interacting on that site. So, yes, we're going to chat a little bit more about cash flow and profit, but I think, I'll try and keep it brief and I'll try and keep it fairly understandable so that you can understand why that you would apply yourself to this principle. So, really, this episode's all about forecasting cash flow. Now, I don't know what you know about forecasting cash flow, but what I know is that it's not that big a deal. It's just another discipline. It's another arrow in our quiver that we really need to understand and really have some facility or some way of doing that. Because, again, a lot of what I talk about is just to give us the sleep at night factor. And I think if we were pushing somewhere, I would say that what we're trying to do is get an element of control in our business. And when we have control, we probably sleep better. And so this is really about everything that we do is always pushing to get us out of that catastrophic failure type nose down, we're going to crash zone into something that resembles, 40,000 feet at cruise, We're in control. We are up the front of the plane. We know what we're doing and we know where we're going. We've got a good team working with us. We've got good equipment and skies are blue and there's lollipops everywhere, right? So this is what, if people say to me, well, because there is no one thing. I mean, if you look at our activity key metrics and any of my clients will know that it's, there's quite a few columns, but they're all very important and they all interrelate. And so for you as a business owner, you do have to back out of that on-site. And there's the challenge too. The chasm between, working your fingers to the bone on a job site and then getting across that chasm into business ownership, legitimate business ownership, where there's an element of systemization, people in control, that is definitely the challenge. So quickly today, we're going to run through forecasting cash flow, okay? So a couple of things I want to talk about. I'm going to talk about understanding your income cycle, okay, because that kind of helps you predict. None of us can see around corners accurately, but we try and enhance, what we're trying to do in the way of forecasting and, using spreadsheets and, historical data, that can definitely help you go a long way to doing that. We're going to talk about planning fixed and variable expenses. I think it's important that we consider what it costs to run our business and make sure we are very much in a planning mode. And then, of course, we've got to have a bit of a buffer zone, something there that's going to really, help us prepare for the unexpected, which is kind of an oxymoron. But anyway, right, so point number one. So we understand your income cycle to predict cash flow. Okay, so really the first step in cash flow forecasting is to understand your income cycle. This includes identifying when payments will come in from clients, whether it's through progress payments or your lump sum final invoices. So that is a really good place to start. I think I mentioned this in last week's episode about the cash flow forecast spreadsheet. So if you've gone home and done your homework and you've built yourself a little bit of a forecast spreadsheet, then this is going to really segue straight into that. So, I think what I want you to do as part of your homework, the fact that we're in mid-February or thereabouts, end of Feb, getting there, in 2025, is I need you to audit what projects that you've either got under construction or you think you'll have. Now, if you're having trouble forecasting projects because you don't have anything in your possibility or opportunity pipeline, or you've not got anything under contract, then you're going to struggle getting past the next 30 days. So you're going to say to me, what's the point of doing that? So that is automatically going to throw me to a different position completely, because if we're going to try and audit the number of projects between now and Christmas, let's say, and we're going to look at those stage claims, and you say to me, I haven't got that, then obviously we've got a sales shortfall. Now I just start asking questions like, well, what are we doing for lead gen? How much money are we investing? Is the agency that we've got doing our marketing, are we happy with them? Are we auditing and monitoring and measuring their performance, et cetera, et cetera? Or are we having smoke blown up our skirts from these people that tell us they're trying and, they've got no control over the marketplace, et cetera, et cetera? So you might just skip this whole episode and go, I ain't going to do no cash flow forecasting because I've got to figure out how I'm going to get more inquiry to get sales to get cash flow. Okay, so let's imagine that you've got good pipeline, right? Let's imagine that you've got good lead in and that you've got good workflow. You've got expressions of interest, good expressions of interest, or you've got approvals in principle verbally, or you've got contracts, waiting to start, kind of like we do. We've got a significant project that is 7 figures. This is going to kick off 1st of September, which happens to be a Monday. That's going to be completed by May 1. So that, to me, is in my workflow pipeline, and we're working on a lot of that design, plan, and price pre-construction phase currently with clients. And so, that's what you're looking to try and put together. And then in the shorter term, we've got, a couple of small ones that we're going to sort of put together as well. So that's what I'm talking about. Just do an audit, right? Figure out what you've got, what you haven't got. Then what you want to start doing is look at, obviously tracking the historical payments. So you could look over the last 3 years if you've got accounting software. Now, this is what happens. I ask questions and people give me answers, and then I counterpunch. So I'm automatically going to go and say, hey, go to your accounting software, filter out dates for the next 3 months. So let's say you're listening to this in February, and you go, right, what happened in last year between March 1 and say, so we've got March, April, May, end of May, right? May 30th. What was the income like last year? And then you can actually do that for the year before, and I think you can do that for the year before that. So you can actually get 3 years worth of data. Now, because you wouldn't rely on just last year, because who knows? I mean, then you go back into COVID times, you're sort of pushing back into there. So is that data going to be completely reliable? I wouldn't think so, because it was fairly much a boom in COVID time, for us anyway. And then out the back of it, everything slumped pretty hard. Guys were carrying too much overhead. They weren't making fast enough decisions. They weren't closing deals because they started to become a little more challenging to close because of inflation and interest rate spikes. So it was almost like a perfect storm. So finding out from that data, you'd have to average it out, and then you'd be a little bit more conservative as well. So that's what you can do. You look at those historical payment patterns and figure out, what's going on. And so that will create some reliability in your forecasting, which is what we want, okay? So by knowing your project timelines and payment terms, you can create reliable forecast of when cash will flow into the business, okay? So that's kind of massively important. So something else, historical payment patterns. Something else to consider is seasons. Now, I'm not talking about financial seasons. I'm actually talking about physical seasons like winter and, the time of the year with Christmas and things like that. So that's why analyzing. So if you go and look at those last 3 years worth of data for that 90-day period, and then you might go, look, it's pretty predictable. I know that if I talk to builders in this region, they know that the inquiry level is pretty shy in January. And it's because it's got to do with the fact that it's Christmas, just like anywhere else in the world, and it's New Year's. But, we're right in the thick of winter at that point. And so, I've noticed that organically there's some lead gen starting to produce. Where I'm not marketing, I'm getting inquiry. And I'm like, okay, people are starting to sort of get their heads on straight. And I try to move the needle because I know what's going to happen. You go from famine to feast. So we try and market in the way and say, look, get up the front of the construction queue, because what we have now, I'm doing meetings with people that are interstate or in the next province, and there's this urgency around. Matter of fact, I had a meeting last week, a couple of days ago, and the conversation was, can we have it done by the time our school year's done, which is around the end of June. Now I've got a couple of kids still in school, so I'm like, okay, I get it, because we're going to go to the lake for summer. So, those kinds of, so what happens is it's a little bit of a slump for us during winter potentially, and as far as inquiry goes, and then there's a spike in the late part of winter, early part of spring, and then it's crazy, and then the pushes onto Christmas. So using that understanding around there's a social dynamics will help you forecast, as well as looking at your data. So between those two sources of information, you can come up with something that's pretty reliable. So side note, other reasons for cash flow forecasts, obviously, if you're doing something with financing, then not only are you going to look at the last 3 years worth of books or minimum 2 years, but there's going to be questions asked of you around what forecast cash flow has the company got. I don't know what you might be doing. There might be some capital acquisition, things like that. So you're like, okay, this is what we need to do. So you're going to need to know what's going to happen in the next sort of 6 to 12 or 18 months. And so it makes somebody who is considering financing whatever it is that you're talking about, if you can show good consistency over the last 3 years, and you can use that data, then formulate a proposal that says over the next 18 months, this is what we are forecasting with some credibility, then that can help you as well. So what we want to be, is very competent, coherent, organized, well-spoken, clear-thinking type operators, business owners. And so you might be sitting there going, mate, you have no idea. If you could see into my brain, it would be just one big gong show. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm glad you realize that. But at the end of the day, the goal then is, if we're going to improve our business, from a financial standpoint, from a lifestyle standpoint, from a delivery and an operation standpoint, where it really starts is how you think. See, how you think determines how you feel, and how you feel determines your actions and activities and your routines, that development process. And so if I can see what you do, and I look at your truck, and I look at your job sites, and I look at your finances and all of that, and I think this is just one big shit show, I will be fairly confident in assuming that it's got a lot to do with the way that you think. It's very much, that's where it starts. Okay. So, we talk about bottlenecks and roadblocks and, restrictions. It's really in that 6 inches between our ears. If we think that we're going okay, but everyone looking in says, wow, that's quite the mess, then really, folks, we're living in this world of bliss where we actually don't know. We don't know what we don't know. And, obviously part of my role as a business coach or a franchisor is firstly to bring awareness. Your whole thing is a mess, okay? And we've got to kind of just pick one thing and start working on that to make improvement. And it can be confronting. It's because then if that's the case and you let your ego get in the way, I won't hang around because I just know that I can't beat somebody's ego. It's up to them to figure that out. It can't be beat. So, guys and gals, like, this is such an independent, individual journey because the fight is not external, the fight is internal. You will not win if you don't change the way that you think. So you go, okay, Max, I'm one of those guys and I need to change. Well, it really starts with your own personal development in the way of, not just a leadership, but at the same time, you've got to start to understand things. And I think I'm a big fan of the E-Myth, the Michael Gerber book, where it talks about actually a franchise prototype. It's got nothing to do with franchising, but in essence, and as a franchisor, what we have to do is provide the best systems, because that's what gives builders a fighting chance at really creating, a system for themselves and their building company that creates more profit and therefore builds a better lifestyle. So, in the early days of franchising, I would think that, well, if I've got this system, anyone can make it work. And the way I didn't recruit terribly well, and I talk a lot about this to my EBA clients. And it's just, I was actually re-listening to another Alex Hormozy podcast, and he talks about a lot of what he knows today, and he was literally teaching out of his negative experience. And he will say there was 11 things that I didn't do particularly well. One of those was recruitment. And so if you are the guy or the gal that's running the show and your head's a mess, then you'll have good people come into your life and they'll be going, oh, okay, this is not what it's like. I'm out of here. Now, that's not necessarily an indictment against you. It's just where you're, not for eternity, it's just where you're at that moment. If you're having people coming in and coming out, you've got to look at the way you're recruiting, but you've also got to make sure at the same time that you are doing everything that you can do to be the best that you can be. Okay, so that was completely off track, but I hope that helps. Any questions, hit me with an email. Right, we've got a plan for our fixed and variable expenses. So forecast both the fixed expenses like rent, salaries, insurance, all of those, and then your variable expenses such as, vehicles, perhaps, material subcontract costs, and then obviously any tooling up you're going to do. So anything that needs to be added to your arsenal as far as a company, that's going to give you a complete picture and overview of all of your future outflows. Okay. Second part of that is, again, historical data to identify trends in your expenses. Now, it's funny because I do this both at the beginning of the month and the end of the month. So at the beginning of the month, I go back to the previous month and I look at my expenses and I sort of go, okay, this is what I'm up against, right? And so using that historical data helps me calculate monthly, but also annually as I move forward. So I do the same thing. So it's a bit of an audit. So, if you've got certain overheads coming down the pipe, because this is what we're doing is we're putting this together with some of our income, okay? And we're looking at that cash flow projection. Now we're looking at our fixed and variable expenses. So, using historical data like, for motor vehicles, for me, I've basically been driving the same truck for 3 or 4 years. I know that I don't do more than 15,000 Ks a year. Therefore, I service a vehicle once a year and I don't do tires. So I can automatically, if my account said, what do you spend on motor vehicles? Well, I know on that truck, not much, okay? But then if you've got something else, like, I've got an enclosed 12-foot trailer, it's like, okay, so that commercial insurance is X amount. So what you're trying to do is you're educating yourself, because have you ever had one of those months where you go, oh yeah, I forgot about that bill. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, I forgot about that. I forgot about that. That's because we are not doing an audit. So when I wake up first thing in the morning, the first thing I do, if I grab my phone, is I go straight to all of the bank accounts. I just need to know what's going on. That way I go, okay, because that'll provoke something in me. It's like, right, that payment's got to come in yet. I need to go and talk to that homeowner or that client or whatever the case may be for you. It's just a good way for me to start the day. Now, as the companies get bigger, I'll either outsource that or I'll do it less often. But right now, that's what I feel like doing. So I'm using that, data from yesterday to make sure that everybody's flush for today. And that's really short, That might end up going to weekly, and then it might end up going to monthly. But that's kind of where it's at for yours truly at this point. So, this helps predict when you'll need cash to cover the cost within your business. So knowing what your fixed and variables are, and it is challenging. So some of you guys might get software and you'll be like, all right, it's a $2,500 or $3,500 subscription. Can be more per year. But what I need to make sure, if I know that one lump sum is out there, then I will maybe forget about it as far as what it comes down to monthly. So I do a lot of stuff on a monthly basis because it helps me. I can audit quickly. Because if I've paid something 6 months ago, you tend to it's off your radar a little bit, unless you've got a spreadsheet and you're looking at your accounting software and you're just keeping one eye on that. But guys and gals, this is where I think that the challenge comes in for builders in general, whether you're franchisees with Smithies or whether you're an EBA client or you're a privateer. It's actually doing the work. I think I chatted about this EBA Young Guns and doing a group coaching thing and whatever. And it really just comes down to that 1 to 5 hours per week. And I don't think that's a big ask, because I'm pretty sure that you would be blowing 5 hours per week. I reckon I could easily figure out whether there's another 5 hours that I could do something if I needed to pay attention to that because it's new. I think I could figure that out. So, we've got to be good stewards of our time, but we've also got to be good stewards of our finance, good stewards of our human resource and things like that as well. So just be mindful that, planning in advance, not just because that's one thing. You'll go, right, this is the cash we're making. And here's the scary part. You'll go and do a cash flow projection and go, geez, that's a bit lean. And then over here, you'll look at your expenses and you'll be like, well, that shit doesn't figure out. And that is definitely what I think, and that's where we talk about on the activity key metrics, is that we've got to know what our break-even point. I think I was banging on about that last episode, so I won't go there again. But, if you're looking at your cash flow and it's a bit lean, then you need to get your fixed expenses and figure out, what does it cost me per month to run my company? What's my pricing model doing as far as generation of profit margin, not markup? And then you'll go, geez, I need to generate $40, $50, $60, $70, $80,000 worth of revenue just to break even. And so when we don't connect those dots between forecast cash flow and then, which is kind of borderline actual, because you go, if you've got no contract signed, you can guarantee there's going to be no cash flow, but there's going to still be bills. So this is the talk that we have. This is the hard talk when you're talking to, when I'm talking with builders about, stop winging it, for crying out loud. Like this bullshit about, to be right, mate. I'm telling you, builders die a death of 1 million paper cuts because they just keep kicking the can down the road and think she'll be right, mate. And it's devastating because I said this to a client the other day. I said this to the client. I said, these major corporate companies that all of a sudden shut the door when there's no froth and bubble, there's no dust. All of a sudden, they've just given everyone severance or redundancies, and they've shut up shop. And you know why they know that? Because they've got financial controllers that have done the trajectory. They've called it. They've said, look, over the next 12 months, based on the current figures, based on his historical data, based on our overheads, it's unsustainable. And this is some real talk. And I would bet that there is at least one person in the audience right now that's going, I do not want to do cash flow projections, and I certainly don't want to do an audit on my fixed and variable expenses for the company. I do not want to know what I'm spending on my company, and I've got no idea what my profit margins are because I'm all over the shop. Honestly, that's like putting a 5-year-old in charge of a 650 horsepower, race car. It's never going to work out. It's never going to end well. And so this is where the hard talk comes in as well about, we know that 50% of builders go broke in the first 5 years, and this is why. Lack of education, okay? So I started right at the beginning of the show saying, okay, this is a bit of a boring subject, but I tell you, it gets pretty frigging exciting when you realize that you can't pay your bills. And then all of a sudden it's like, the business freaking sucks and the marketplace sucks and the interest rates, and freaking if you're in Canada, maybe you point the finger at Justin Trudeau or his mates. Like, this is the thing, guys. You know, I just don't care. I don't care. I don't care what inflation's doing or interest rates are doing. I can't control any of that, okay? What I can control are my expenses. I can know well in advance where the black spots are going to be. You know, and so this is where point number 3, where we prepare for the unexpected, you know, with buffer funds. So we're creating ourselves a little bit of a war chest, and it ranges between 5 and 10% as a contingency, or leaning on or demanding that you've got a hard deck of 2 to 3 months worth of your fixed expenses. So if your business costs you're a one-man band, you know it costs you 10 grand a month, guys and gals, that business should have $30,000 in the bank at all times. That is your hard deck. You don't go and buy the friggin' pontoon boat. You don't go and buy the dirt bike. You don't go and buy a new truck, because that's going to eat into your hard deck funds. And that is the contingency that you need to be able to weather the storm. And most guys and girls don't have that. You know, and if big companies can go down, see, we make money slow. If you're a little guy and you're only doing $1 million a year, you're actually going to go broke slower, which is good, as long as you get on it. And then you go back to that video. I must get that video number, Dom, of how to unbroke your business. And that episode number, just so you can start your education process there. You know, it's good. The big companies go out of broke quick and in a big way, because they hold out, and then they all agree that this is not going to work out. And so basically it just gets shut down. Whereas us guys keep going. And the problem with that is I wouldn't say it's sustainable. And it's just not pleasant to live through, because everywhere you turn, there's a collections agency, there's a door knocker, there's someone ringing you. Like, guys, you know, I've had enough negative experiences in my life to understand with great clarity that it rips the creative out of my soul, for real. Okay? When I'm not dealing with dickheads and muppets and people that are just confused and delusional and who are hell-bent on giving me a hard time because I recruited badly, let's just say that, then once I free myself, I recognize where I can do better, and then I begin to do better, you live in a lot happier space. Now, if you're so far down that track that it's hard to dig out, or it's impossible to dig out, you need to start having some serious thoughts about what are my options? What can I do? And so, you know, get help. Now, you know, obviously I would urge you to, if, you know, I've seen enough tragedy in this building industry to know that it's you know, some of us guys and gals can have pretty dark moments because the business beats us up, you know. And, you know, it's hard for me to speak to that because I don't know you, you know, and it is it's an intimate discussion, because I am more concerned about the human than the bank balance, you know. There's some things that are just unwinnable, and you've got to put your ego aside and you just got to face the facts. And it is terribly difficult, and we just got to make sure that we're, you know, getting that help that we need. Okay, so because even with careful forecasting, unforeseen expenses and delays in payments can arise. So you get the unforeseen expenses, and then you get a delayed payment from a client, let's say, and all of a sudden you've got a cash gap and you've got yourself a challenge, right? So having that cash reserve, having the buffer fund, it's really what you've got to be vigilant on is, like, you've got to educate yourself. You've got to be on top of it. So you go, that was a blind side. You haven't got unlimited funds. You've only got 5 or 10%. You might have a couple of months in the bank, but you know that you can't afford for that thing to happen again. So as we are building, a bricklayer doesn't just put one brick on the wall, butters the ends, puts it on the wall, and then takes it off again, right? He'll put the brick on the wall, and what we do as we're building the business, we're learning from our mistakes. I only sent an email to my business partner yesterday, and, you know, we were just breaking down some financial and legal things. And, you know, I did outline, I said, look, this is what I will do going forward. And the reason, we had a bad experience doing it that way, but I said, I did this wrong last time, but lessons learned. And there was 2 lessons that I learned out of that, and I documented them and sent them in that email. So This is what we're doing. We're putting bricks on the wall. We're building a wall. We're building a business, and we are making sure that everything that we're doing is pushing in the right direction. And so that brings you back to the automate, delegate, or detonate. You've just got to figure out in your life what stuff's got to go, what stuff you can automate, and what stuff you can sort of give to somebody else to do. So, except you need cash to do that. So it's all very, tied together pretty tight. So maintaining that contingency of 5 to 10, that's a really good contingency number, in conjunction with the 2 to 3 months, cash balance of your company, whatever your fixed expenses are. And then you can dip into that in the tough times. Again, it's a sleep at night factor, folks. You don't have to do it, mate. You don't have to do anything that I say. I'm just making recommendations and I'm talking to a frigging camera. That's what I'm doing. But you're sitting there in your lounge room, living room, laying in bed, driving down the road. Hopefully it's a podcast, not a YouTube. My sister does that. I'm like, do you listen to my podcast? She's like, no, I watch you on YouTube. Even while you're driving? Yep. I'm like, okay, you're weird. But, you're listening to this, and I guarantee you right now, the cogs are turning. They should be if you're not having a happy time in the building industry, because there's just a whole bunch of stuff going on. And this is where, in the dark times, in the down times, in the hard times, this is where you're going to learn the most, because you're the most desperate to get the thing back on track and out of that catastrophic failure zone and back into the, state of control. Okay. So, if you're effective in your cash flow, projection, and you're looking at those fixed and variable expenses, and you've built yourself a little bit of a buffer, ultimately it does put you in a state of control. And when you are in control, this is what it feels like. You know that you're in control. So for me, it's like, right, I'm in a state of control. However, I know that stuff can change. It's like, right, it's plain sailing right now, but a storm can move in. And so, whilst I am in plain sailing mode, I'm doing two things. I'm looking at how do I maybe get more pace in my system, but at the same time, I'm making sure that I've got my fences mended. From a farming standpoint, you ride the fences. You're looking at the fences. You're looking for holes. You look at where there's damage, and you repair that. So that's whilst we're but most of the time we're basically doing laps of the fence forever, because we've just got so many holes, I just can't get them fixed fast enough. And so it is, mate, it's nothing but a challenge. If running a building company profitably was easy, every single building company owner that would be just absolutely whistling Dixie and having a great old time. Unfortunately, it's a little darker than that. And so, forecasting your cash flow, making sure you've got contingencies in place, make sure your routines and behaviors are mapping to having good systems. Nothing's worse than having a system sitting on the shelf that never gets used. It's where shelves go. Shelves are where systems go to die. And so you got to make sure that, okay, if you're going to implement it, don't make it too heavy. Whilst you've got minimal time, it has to be leaner than, what you would do if you had more time on your hands. And so, this is where you do an audit of you, your personality, what your skills are, your pros and cons. And, I don't know you. I don't know what you're like when you're interacting with a client. I don't know what your systems are. There's so many X factors, it's out of control. And sometimes I sit down this podcast and go, it's not about I've got nothing to say. It's like, mate, what do I say today? Like, where do I start? Because I don't know who I'm talking to. But when I'm working with EBA clients, we're going through a process. I'm getting to know the operators, their strong suits, and the things they got to keep working on, as well as the business and the cash flow. And we're kind of understanding what sales are in the pipe. Like, I can craft a bit of a strategy when I'm dealing with an individual. But when I sit down to do this, it's a little bit of a Hail Mary. So hope you got something out of that. Hit me at email, max@elitebusinessadvisory.com. If you got any questions, you could go to the website and hit a book a consultation. You might struggle to get a spot, but if you can't get a spot that suits you because you're in a different hemisphere, then shoot me an email and I'll figure something out, okay? I will make space for you if you want to have a quick chat with me. But I'm a little bit hard to get to at the moment. But happy to have a chat if that's what it takes. I think that's about it. Like and subscribe. One of these drops every week. Get across to Business for Builders VIP. Answer the questions if you could, sort of let you in. And go build a kick-ass business. See you on the next episode. Cheers.